Okay, if everything has gone according to plan, we should be live on YouTube. Hello everyone and welcome back to Weekends with Avrona. So there was no show last week, but I was awake for a couple of days, but don't worry because next week's show, well, if everything goes well, we should have a special guest on for that. But in the meantime, obviously the big topic is the launch of AMD's graphics cards finally. After all those delays, after all of those, leaked specs, everything, they are finally out. And they are a smash hit, to say the least. But there's also a couple of things, now that we kind of taken a step back from everything, that are a bit more concerning and weird. And I think could throw a lot of average consumers off about these graphics cards. But also, showcase the flaws in the new scheme, the new plan that AMD has when they're not really doing flagships anymore. Because, as many people have already pointed out, and I've been actually really interested in a lot of the discussion about these cards in the comments of my video about them, is that it does actually perform worse, at least in many cases, than the 7900 XTX, which is the last gen flagship. And there is a lot of other concerning stuff coming out about these graphics cards. So let's just quickly go into it. The first thing I wanted to touch on is, we'll get back to the 7900 XTX first. The first thing that really kind of stuck out at me when I finally got back, I was able to rewatch the presentation, saw exactly what AMD is planning. The first thing I noticed right off the bat is to do with FSR. Now, AMD has always been great because of how open FSR was. You could run it on your really old AMD graphics cards, you could run it on nvidia graphics cards, you could run it on Intel. I'm pretty sure you could even run it on some integrated graphics. Not the case with FSR 4. Now, in many ways, that's understandable because, wow, just look at it. Look at how great FSR is. Even if it doesn't have the same multi-frame gen as DLSS 4, it can still very much hold its own. And obviously some older cards may not be able to support everything in order to make it happen. But even then, at least it was open to, well, stuff from other companies, right? So here's a good comparison. They don't list other stuff here, which is kind of annoying. But basically everything up to this point, you're able to also run on Intel and nvidia as well as you can see right here, just Radeon graphics, integrated Radeon graphics, and I'm pretty sure also integrated Intel graphics. But don't quote me on that. I actually can't remember for these first two. And then up to FSR 3, if I'm remembering correctly, you were still able to run that on nvidia. Actually, yeah, you must have been because I did that video comparing them. And now we are up to AMD's FSR 4.0, and it's only available for AMD and only for the RX 9000 graphics cards. Again, if it was just the case of all the hardware just not being good enough to support everything, I'd get that. But not even NVIDIA 40 or 50 series being able to support this is kind of disappointing. You'd think that they'd want to give people, on the NVIDIA side, an option to try it on like they were up to that point, just to see what it's like on the other side, what it's like on Team Red, what kind of things they're capable of. Because to a lot of people, who are running NVIDIA graphics cards, sure, all of this seems interesting, exciting, whatever, but they can't really test it for themselves. So I'm really confused by it. Is anyone aware? Maybe they're bringing support for NVIDIA later or something? I know it makes sense from a business perspective, why would they bother with making sure it all works on competitors' hardware? But it has been the policy up to this point, and that's been one of the things that has been kind of cool about FSR, is just how open it is and how easy they've been making it for developers to also introduce it. They don't have the same attitude as DLSS that was just so restricted. And now all of a sudden XTSS is the most open of the three standards, which is kind of weird, but oh well. At least FSR does look pretty awesome. FSR 4, absolutely mind-blowing, looks pretty cool, but it's still kind of annoying. So if anyone does know, to maybe announce somewhere if they may be bringing it over to the NVIDIA and Intel side of things, please do let me know. I'll be actually interested, or if not, if they listed a reason why not. because I actually couldn't find too much information about us and why it's not capable of running, apart from just, well, it was AMD's will apparently. But there's a couple of other things we should probably talk about, and like I alluded to earlier, one thing that could definitely confuse a lot of people is the fact that these cards, while they actually, if you look at just pure performance and just here looking at the TechSpot reviews, is actually slower than AMD's last gen graphics card, unless you have, well, FSR 4, which again is only restricted to this latest one. So it's a very, very interesting dynamic. It's a very similar story with nvidia's graphics cards, where, you know, one of the biggest selling points is just the DLSS 4 only available on brand new graphics cards, and people are just accusing it of gaining the performance crown by just using fake frames. But I haven't seen a kind of same fake frame language used when it comes to AMD as much. Though again, that I guess it does make sense because they didn't have multi-frame gen. But anyway, looking at performance, right? Pretty much across the board, the 7900 XTX is way faster. Look how many cards in between here. 19 frames difference. But things get really interesting when, wow, how many tests have they done? Is this what I'm looking for? Yeah, this is ray tracing. Then if you look at ray tracing, however, they have nailed it. We saw some early tests of that, some early benchmarks on, I don't know, like 4 weeks ago now, on one of the shows a while back, and I could not believe, I actually thought it was fake how close AMD got in ray tracing. But this is where you're gonna get your money's worth compared to the 7900 XTX. Look at this. Granted, it's still not on the level of something like a 5070 Ti, or even something like what I have, a 4080, but compared to the 7900 XTX, which again, it beats this out in a raster performance. It is actually mind-blowing how far AMD has got in their generation. That is actually pretty cool. Though, I wonder how much more it's going to matter to people versus rasterization. Obviously, people prefer good raster performance versus good ray tracing performance. However, rasterization is, you know, slowly... I don't know, because you can say that, you know, rasterization only games are slowly becoming a minority, and you have games like Indiana Jones that require ray tracing, but then a lot of people who are still just purely performance cautious will still go for that rasterization. And then if we go, okay, do they have, yeah, basically all of these are just the same. 9070 XT wins out big. But where is... Do they have any comparisons here for FSR 4? No, they not. They do not. Anyway. But yeah, I was just here looking at all of this, and I'm actually just really impressed, but also really torn about the effect it's going to have on the average consumer, and them blindly buying this card and then being confused why, in rasterization at least, it's slower than its predecessor. What also definitely doesn't help is the new naming scheme and the fact they also skipped a generation, right? So it isn't just that it makes it seem like it's 2 generations ahead, and it ends up being a bit slower. Again, for a lot of people who do the due diligence, they will know. But at the end of the day, you also have to make sure that these products are accessible to the layman, that everyone is able to understand what they're buying, why something could be better or worse than something else. And to that end, I do like that nvidia are switching over to this new naming scheme, where it's more easily comparable to nvidia's, right? Because you know that the 9070 XT is, you know, trying to be around the 5070 area. That makes sense. However, I do still worry that at least a couple of people were tricked by that. I don't say tricked, but just they misunderstood what a card is about, and they ended up buying the 7900 XTX just with a pure rasterization performance, and then are kind of confused why it doesn't perform as good. So that's one of the consequences of AMD's new approach. I am worried, but hopefully it is just temporary. Hopefully we will see AMD return to making flagships, because clearly they are figuring it out, right? They are finally getting that real value out of the entire Radeon division when it comes to making something that's a competitive product. Anyway, there's one more thing I wanted to address that's kind of worrying about it. I'm sorry I'm being such a killjoy here, but you know me. If you want someone just showering these cards of praise, go to one of the million other YouTubers doing it right now. And don't get me wrong, they're great cards. They're fun cards, that they are really competitively priced. But, okay, about the last one. That's also a bit of a controversial topic, because it seems that that really low pricing just, well, it did materialize, but only for a couple of minutes before they sold out, and all of these much more expensive models reappeared. Now, there appears to be several reasons for why the MSRP is just not really there. Isn't really seen much. Instead, you're just getting all of these way more expensive SKUs. Number one, there is no reference card, like I said in my main video. So companies are able to have a bit more freedom in how they price their cards. Number two, there's obviously a bit of an element of retailers taking advantage of this, but also we saw that there is a bit more at play. So it appears that because they were stocking these cards for a while now to make sure that they don't pull in nvidia and have no stock. And from what I read, that these retailers, some of them were expecting, you know, rebates, then basically like wholesale rebates for the purchases, but then they kind of didn't materialize the way they wanted or something. It is getting really ugly and confusing behind the scenes apparently, but because of it, they're now forced to charge quite a bit more. Yeah, and I'm really confused by why it isn't a reference card, a Founders Edition. If AMD knew, right, they had one job, and that was to shock us all with a price and make that price stick, then why didn't they make a product that would basically just peg the price to be around that MSRP? Maybe not to lose good faith with partners, maybe to try and get more partners on board, because obviously in the long term, most people aren't looking at reference cards. Most people don't buy Founders Edition when they go for nvidia. Many people buy the limited edition Intel version just because it looks so good, and also because the amount of partners that Intel has is so low, but that's a completely different story. So my theory is, did they do it just to stay on the good side of the AIB partners? Like, did they just do it because they don't want more companies migrating to just nvidia or migrating over to Intel? They wanted to really get on the good side and convince them to invest as much as possible into as many SKUs as possible, but also into the marketing, right? Because all of these companies, the more partners you have, the more marketing all of them will be doing for you as that, you know, main GPU maker. So obviously they want that as well. So it is kind of an interesting situation. I need a quick drink there. So yeah, like I said, people were able to get these at MSRP, but only for a very brief couple of minutes before they got sold out, or brand new SKUs were listed out at a much higher price. So it is very much a shame, and I saw a lot of people being disappointed about it. And we should have kind of expected that. Obviously, no launch is perfect, and we're all kind of expecting something to go wrong, because it is AMD. And there's always something that goes wrong for AMD every single generation, no matter how much we want them to win, no matter how sure we are that they will put up a product that will at least win back a couple of spots in that Steam hardware survey. And this launch, you know, as much as we like to appreciate the cards themselves, which again, they are some fine pieces of silicon, the launch itself, we do have to admit, had some kinks that hopefully they will work out soon. But yeah, rant over. It is a pretty short show because I have plenty going on, but I just kind of want to get my thoughts out there about these graphics cards. I'll probably make another video about all of this pretty soon, because there's really a lot to talk about here. It is a very, very interesting generation. A generation I'll be probably not really buying anything in. I have a 4080, it's more than good enough for me. If there's one thing it's not good at, and I talked about it in a previous show, it's playing that new Indiana Jones game. Even at like performance DLSS at max settings of path tracing, it is just impossible to run. I get like single digit FPS. So obviously something like a 5080 or 5090 would come in helpful there with DLSS 4, especially the 5090 with its 32 gigs of VRAM. It's just a dream for video editing and a couple of other really demanding projects. But seeing everything that's been going on, between them not supporting 32-bit CUDA and the performance in titles that require that suffering a lot, and I do enjoy myself playing some older games, so that's a big deal breaker there. Between them just being a fire hazard, between all of the various stutters and glitches and black screens and whatnot, and I know they're offering patches and driver updates for that as well, but I think I would just be sticking to the 4080 for now unless something really big happens. Unless, now that I think about it, something I could do is just get a 4090, get a used 4090, issues that my system is water cooled. And I really want to stick to this specific Aorus block I have. That's the only reason I bought this 4080, by the way, because I really loved the Aorus design for this graphics card, and they didn't offer one for the 4090. That's it. And if I'm able to get a 4090, strip it, and then put it in the same water block, I would need to make sure that there's no clearance issues. When it comes to the layout, to like whatever GPU is or the VRM is, that should be identical. The only thing I'm worried about is obviously the 4090 has more VRAM chips. That could be some interference there. It's not even the fact that they won't have the same amount of cooling, like it's not made to be cooled. I could just fill those spots with some more thermal pads. That's like the least of the worries. But if there's literally just metal, if there's literally just part of the block where those memory chips on the 4090 are, then obviously it's not going to work. So I'm going to have to look if the layout of the PCB is the same, and also if the block has the kind of clearance for a 4090. So if anyone knows, by the way, if anyone knows that, if anyone knows a way I can verify that, link to some sources or something, that would be fantastic. Thanks in advance if anyone is able to help with that, because that could actually be a pretty cool project. Just taking one graphics card and just slapping into a water block from another one, because again, it is such a phenomenal looking graphics card. But anyway, that is pretty much it for this very, very short show. So, like I said, we should hopefully have a very special guest next week, but in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this live stream. If you did, then remember to subscribe, like, whatever, and I see you all in whatever I make next. Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye.